The marble floor in the Whitmore estate had been polished that morning, and it gleamed under the late afternoon sun pouring through the tall arched windows. 6 women stood in a careful line near the grand piano, each one holding a slim leather folder against her chest, each one wearing the same calm, professional smile that suggested years of practice in front of important families. They had come from the most expensive child care agencies in New York. They had driven up to the Hudson Valley that morning in dark sedans, and they had been shown into the great room one by one, the way people are shown into a place where decisions are made. Thomas Whitmore stood near the marble fireplace, his hands folded loosely in front of him, watching his daughter cross the room slowly. Maya was 7 years old, small for her age, with her hair pulled back in 2 careful braids and a soft yellow ribbon tied at the end of each one. She wore her favorite cream-colored dress, the one with the small embroidered roses along the hem, and she walked the way she always walked when adults were watching her. Slowly, carefully, the way someone walks when they know they are being measured. "Go on, Maya," Thomas said gently. "These ladies have come a long way to meet you. You can speak with each of them, then you choose the one you like best." Maya stopped a few feet in front of the line of women. She did not look at any of them yet. She was looking at the marble floor instead, the way it reflected the light, the way the lines between the tiles seemed to stretch on and on toward the far end of the room. "Hi, sweetheart," one of the women said warmly, kneeling down to make herself smaller. "My name is Catherine. I heard you love horses. I used to teach little girls how to ride. Maybe one day we could go to the stables together." Maya looked up at her, but her face stayed quiet, careful, the way it always did when adults tried to win her with promises too quickly. "No, thank you," Maya said softly. Another woman stepped forward smoothly, as if this were all part of a plan. "I'm Olivia. I speak 3 languages and I tutor children in piano. Your father said you've been wanting to learn." She tilted her head slightly. "We could start tomorrow if you'd like." Maya shook her head. "No, ma'am." A third woman, taller than the others, with sharp blue eyes and a warm voice, said, "Maya, why don't you sit with us for just a moment? You can ask us any question you want. There's no wrong answer." She gestured toward the velvet couch behind them. "We just want to get to know you." The women shifted slightly, forming a soft half-circle around the little girl, the way grown-ups do when they have been trained to make a child feel at the center of attention without making her feel cornered. They smiled. They spoke kindly. They lowered their voices. And they waited. From the wide doorway that led to the east hallway, Esther Brooks stood very still, holding a small bundle of folded linen napkins in her hands. She had been on her way to the dining room when she heard the voices, and she had paused without meaning to, the way a person pauses when they sense something important is happening in a room they are not supposed to enter. Esther was 46 years old, though her hands looked older than that from the years of cleaning, polishing, and folding. She wore the simple gray uniform of the Whitmore house staff, with a white apron tied neatly at her waist, and her hair pinned back into a low bun the way she had worn it since she was a young woman. She had been working in this house for almost 8 years. She rarely spoke when the family had guests. She rarely stood in this part of the house at all unless she had a task to finish. But today, something had stopped her in the doorway. She was looking at Maya, and without realizing it, she was holding her breath. Maya turned her head slightly. She had felt the look the way children always feel the looks of the people who love them, even before they understand what love is. She glanced toward the doorway, and her eyes met Esther's for just a second. Esther tried to step back gently into the hallway, the way the house rules said she should. But before she could move, Maya turned away from the line of women. She did not walk slowly this time. She did not look at her father. She crossed the long marble floor with quick, certain steps, past the velvet couch, past the grand piano, past the 6 women who had traveled from across the state to meet her. She walked straight to the doorway where Esther was standing, and without saying a word, she reached up and wrapped her small hand around Esther's fingers. Then she turned to face the room. "I choose her," Maya said. The air in the great room seemed to shift, the way air shifts before a sudden change in the weather. The 6 women looked at one another quickly, then at Thomas, then back at the small girl standing in the doorway holding the cleaning lady's hand. Thomas Whitmore lowered his hands slowly to his sides. "Maya," he said carefully, "Miss Brooks is not one of the choices." But Maya did not let go. Esther's fingers went still inside Maya's small hand. She did not pull away, but she did not squeeze back either. She simply stood there, the bundle of folded napkins still pressed against her chest with her other hand. Her eyes lowered slightly the way they always lowered when the family was speaking in a room she happened to be in. "Maya, sweetheart, Catherine said gently, rising back to her full height. Her voice was still warm, but something in it had thinned. Miss Brooks is a wonderful part of the household, we can all see that, but she's the cleaning lady. She takes care of the house. A nanny takes care of you. Those are two very different jobs. I know, Maya said quietly. Olivia stepped forward, her smile bright again but a little tighter at the corners. What you're feeling is very sweet, Maya, it really is, but Miss Brooks already has a job. She wouldn't have time to take care of you the way you need. She has so much to do every day around the house. A fourth woman who had not yet spoken came forward now. She had silver hair pinned in a neat twist, and the kind of voice that sounded like it had been trained for important rooms. Maya, dear, sometimes when children spend a lot of time around the same people in a big house, they get a little confused about who is family and who works for the family. That's not anyone's fault. It happens in homes like this one all the time. She lowered her voice slightly, almost as if she were sharing a secret. And sometimes, sweetheart, when a staff member sees a chance to become closer to a child, they take that chance because it can help them in their job. They might give you treats, stay a little longer at night, do small extra things because deep down they want to keep their position. It isn't always genuine. We just want you to understand that. The room went very still. Esther did not move. She kept her eyes lowered. Maya looked up at her for a moment, then looked back at the silver-haired woman. That's not true, Maya said. The woman blinked, surprised by the calmness in the child's voice. Maya, I'm only telling you what happens sometimes in big houses. That's not true, Maya said again, a little firmer. You just got here today, you don't even know Miss Esther, but you're already saying things about her like you know her. That means you're not telling the truth. Catherine tried again, her voice softer now, almost coaxing. We didn't mean it like that, sweetheart. You said she's doing it because she wants to keep her job, Maya said. But last winter, when I had the flu and I threw up in my bed in the middle of the night, nobody was awake. Nobody knew. But Miss Esther was downstairs cleaning and she heard me crying. She came up by herself and she changed my sheets and she gave me water and she stayed sitting next to me until the sun came up. Maya looked at each of the women slowly, the way her teacher at school looked at the class when she wanted them to listen carefully. Nobody told her to do that, Maya said. Nobody was watching. Nobody was paying her extra. She just did it because I was a little girl and I was sick and I was alone. The silver-haired woman opened her mouth, then closed it again. Thomas felt something tighten inside his chest, the way it had tightened earlier when he had first seen his daughter cross the room. He had not known about that night. No one had told him. He had been away on business that week in Singapore, and when he had come home, Maya had been better, and life had moved on the way it always moved on in the Whitmore house. Important things happened in the rooms upstairs while important men signed papers in rooms across the ocean, and somehow the two things never met. He looked at Esther now, really looked at her. She still had not lifted her eyes. Maya was not finished. And when I'm sad at school and I come home and I don't want to talk to anyone, she said, Miss Esther doesn't ask me what's wrong. She just brings me warm milk with honey and sits in the kitchen until I'm ready. And when I have a bad dream, she's the one who hears me from the hallway because she stays late on Tuesdays to fold the towels, and she's the only one who's still awake. The little girl's voice did not rise. It did not shake. It just kept going, steady and calm, the way children sound when they have decided to tell the truth no matter what. You just came today, Maya said. You don't know any of that, but you already said she was doing it for a reason that isn't true, so if you lie about her now, you might lie about me later. No one in the room said anything for a long moment. Then Thomas spoke more quietly than he had spoken all afternoon. Maya, he said, I'd like you to go upstairs for a few minutes. Maya did not move. Her small hand stayed wrapped around Esther's fingers, and she looked up at her father with the same calm expression she had worn since she had crossed the room. Can Miss Esther come with me? She asked. Thomas looked at her for a long moment. He could feel the eyes of the 6 women on him, waiting to see how he would handle this, the way people watch a man at the front of a meeting to see whether he is in control of the room or not. In the world he came from, a man who could not redirect his own daughter in front of guests was a man who would lose other things too slowly over years, until he no longer remembered when he had stopped being in charge of his own life. Maya, he said gently, Miss Brooks has work to finish in the dining room. You go up to your room, I'll come talk to you in a few minutes. I'll wait for her, Maya said. Maya, I can wait, Daddy, I'm not in a hurry. The silver-haired woman let out a small breath, almost too soft to hear, but Thomas heard it. It was the kind of breath a professional makes when she has decided that the parents in front of her are not strong enough for the situation, and that her role is going to be more difficult than she had expected when she first walked through the door. Catherine stepped forward again. Mr. Whitmore, perhaps it would help if we explained directly to Maya how the position of a nanny actually works in a household like yours. Sometimes children just need to understand the difference between the people who work for the family and the people who care for them. I think Maya understands the difference, Thomas said quietly. The room got very still again. Catherine's smile did not quite reach her eyes anymore. Thomas turned back to his daughter. Maya, please go upstairs. Take your book with you. I'll come find you soon. This time, Maya looked up at Esther. She did not let go of her hand yet. She just looked at her face the way children look at adults when they need permission for something the adults cannot give them. Esther finally lifted her eyes. She did not look at Thomas. She looked only at the little girl. Go on, baby, she said softly. Listen to your daddy. I'll be here when you come back down. Maya hesitated, then nodded. She let go of Esther's fingers slowly, the way a child lets go of something she is afraid will not be there when she returns. She walked across the room, picked up the small picture book she had left on the side table when the guests had arrived, and then she walked back across the marble floor toward the staircase. At the bottom step, she stopped, turned, and looked back at Esther one more time. I'm still choosing you, Maya said, even when I'm upstairs. Then she climbed the stairs slowly, her small feet quiet against the carpet runner until she disappeared around the curve at the top. Thomas waited until he heard her bedroom door close. Then he turned to Esther. Miss Brooks, you may continue with your duties. Please use the back hallway. We'll speak later this afternoon. Esther nodded once. She did not say anything. She did not look at any of the women. She simply turned and walked into the east hallway, the bundle of folded napkins still pressed against her chest, the way she had been carrying them when she first stopped in the doorway, as if no time had passed at all, as if nothing had happened. When she was gone, the great room felt larger and emptier than it had felt all afternoon. The silver-haired woman cleared her throat softly. Mr. Whitmore, I'd like to offer some honest observations, if I may. Thomas gestured for her to continue. In my 30 years of placing nannies in homes like yours, she said, I have seen this exact situation more times than I can count. A child grows attached to a household staff member because that person is convenient, present, and reliable. The child mistakes proximity for love. The parents, who are often busy with work and travel, do not notice the attachment until it has become difficult to unwind. By then, the child has begun to push back against discipline, structure, and any caregiver brought in from outside the household. She paused, letting her words settle. If you allow this attachment to continue, she said, you will find that your daughter becomes increasingly difficult to manage. She will resist authority. She will reject professional caregivers. She will turn every household decision into an emotional negotiation. And in 5 or 6 years, when she becomes a teenager, you will look back at this afternoon and wish you had made a different decision today. Thomas listened without interrupting. He did not nod. He did not disagree. He simply watched her face the way a man watches a card player he has not yet decided to trust. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Thank you for your honesty, Thomas said at last. His voice was calm, the way it was when he was about to disagree with someone in a boardroom without making them feel they had been disagreed with. You've raised important points. I'd like some time to consider what's best for Maya before I make a final decision. The silver-haired woman tilted her head slightly. Of course, Mr. Whitmore, take whatever time you need. We can return tomorrow morning if that would be helpful. That won't be necessary today, Thomas said. I'll be in touch through the agency by the end of the week. A small, tight silence followed. The women exchanged the kind of glance that professional people exchange when they realize they have not gotten the answer they expected. Catherine smiled politely, picked up her folder, and the others followed her lead, gathering their things in careful, unhurried movements that did not betray what they were actually feeling. Mr. Whitmore, Olivia said as she walked past him toward the front hall, we do hope you'll consider what's truly best for Maya. Children sometimes love the people who are easiest to love, not the people who can shape them into the adults they need to become. Thomas did not respond. He simply nodded once, the way he nodded at the end of meetings he had already decided he did not want to repeat. Mrs. Patris, the house manager, appeared from the side hallway as if summoned by an invisible bell, and she walked the women to the front door with the same warm efficiency she used for every guest who passed through the Whitmore estate. Mrs. Patris had worked in large houses for 34 years. She knew how to walk people out of a room without giving them the chance to circle back. When the heavy front door closed behind them, the great room became very quiet again. Thomas stood for a moment, looking at the spot on the marble floor where his daughter had stood and chosen the cleaning lady. He did not move toward the staircase yet. He walked instead to the tall windows behind the grand piano and looked out at the front lawn, where the last of the autumn leaves were skittering across the gravel driveway in the late afternoon wind. He had not expected the afternoon to look like this when he had woken up that morning. He had expected a calm, structured meeting. He had expected his daughter to behave the way she always behaved in front of guests, politely, quietly, with the small, careful smile she had been taught to use since she was 3 years old. He had expected to select a nanny, sign a contract, and have one less item on the long list of things that required his attention this month. He had not expected his daughter to walk past 6 trained professionals and choose the woman in the gray uniform standing in the doorway with a stack of folded napkins. "Mr. Whitmore," he turned. Mrs. Patris was standing a few steps behind him, her hands folded in front of her. "Will the ladies be returning tomorrow, sir?" "No," Thomas said. "Not tomorrow." Mrs. Patris nodded slowly. She was a careful woman. She had managed this household since the year Maya was born, and she had seen Maya through every stage of her short life. The early days when Maya's mother had been alive, the long, quiet months after Maya's mother had passed, and the slow rebuilding of the house's daily rhythm in the years that followed. "Will you be wanting to interview a new round of candidates, sir?" she asked. Thomas was quiet for a moment. "I don't know yet, Mrs. Patris." She nodded again. She did not ask anything else. She knew when to leave a man alone with his thoughts, but before she turned to leave, Thomas spoke again without quite knowing why he was asking. "Mrs. Patris," he said, "how long has Miss Brooks worked in this house?" "Almost 8 years, sir," she replied immediately. "She started the spring after Mrs. Whitmore passed. We brought her in to help with the cleaning while we were reorganizing the staff." Thomas turned slightly toward her. 8 years? "Yes, sir. And in all that time, has she ever asked for a promotion, a different position, a pay raise outside the regular review schedule?" Mrs. Patris thought for a moment. "No, sir, not once." "Has she ever complained about her hours, about her duties, about anything?" "No, sir." "Has she ever asked to spend more time with Maya?" Mrs. Patris paused before answering this one. "No, sir," she said finally. "She has never asked for anything, Mr. Whitmore, but she has done a great deal that was never asked of her." Thomas turned back toward the window. He did not say anything for a long time. Outside, the wind picked up slightly, and a single leaf detached itself from the row of maple trees lining the driveway and drifted slowly, almost lazily, down to the ground. Mrs. Patris left quietly, the way she always left rooms when she sensed that her presence had finished being useful. Thomas stayed at the window for several more minutes, watching the wind move through the trees, listening to the soft sounds of the house settling into the late afternoon. Somewhere in the kitchen, a kettle was being filled. Somewhere upstairs, a door opened and then closed again very softly, the way Maya closed doors when she did not want anyone to know which room she had gone into. He finally turned away from the window and walked toward the staircase. The carpet runner muted his footsteps as he climbed to the second floor. Maya's bedroom was at the end of the long hallway, past the library, past the small sitting room where Thomas's wife had once kept her sewing basket, past the row of framed family photographs that had not been moved or rearranged in 8 years. He stopped outside Maya's door and knocked gently with the back of his knuckles. "Maya, come in, Daddy." He opened the door slowly. Maya was sitting on the rug in the center of her room, her picture book open in her lap, her stuffed rabbit tucked beside her. She did not look up when he walked in. She turned a page carefully, the way she always turned pages, smoothing the paper down with the flat of her hand before reading. Thomas closed the door behind him and walked across the room. He sat down on the edge of her bed, which was a little low for a grown man, and he watched her read for a moment without speaking. "Maya." "Yes, Daddy. We need to talk about what happened downstairs." "I already talked about it," she said without looking up. "I know," Thomas said gently, "but I need to talk about it too." Maya closed the book slowly, marking her page with a small ribbon Esther had sewn into the binding the year before. She set the book aside on the rug, then turned and looked at her father with the same calm expression she had worn in the great room. "I'm not changing my choice," she said. "I'm not asking you to," Thomas replied. The room got very quiet. Maya tilted her head slightly, surprised, the way children are surprised when adults respond in a way they were not expecting. "You're not. I'm asking you to help me understand something," Thomas said. Can you do that? Maya nodded slowly. He leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees, his hands loosely clasped between them. When you said Miss Esther came up to your room the night you were sick, he said, you said no one knew, you said no one was awake. I want to ask you something, Maya, and I want you to think about it before you answer. How many other nights has Miss Esther been there when you needed her? Maya was quiet for a moment. She looked down at her rabbit, then back up at her father. A lot, she said. Tell me about them. Last year on my birthday, Maya said, I cried in my room because I didn't have a mommy to make my cake. I didn't tell anyone. But Miss Esther came in and sat with me, and she said it was okay to be sad and happy at the same time. And then she helped me make the cake myself in the kitchen so I felt better. And she didn't tell anybody I had been crying. Thomas felt the same tightness in his chest he had felt downstairs. And one time, Maya continued, when I had a really bad dream about Mommy, I went down to the kitchen at night to get water, and Miss Esther was there cleaning the stove because she said she liked to do that when she couldn't sleep. And she didn't ask me what was wrong. She just made me hot chocolate and she sat with me at the counter until I wasn't scared anymore. She paused. And when I started first grade, she said, and I was scared on the first day, Miss Esther put a little note in my lunch box that just said, "You are brave." I still have the note. It's in my drawer. Thomas did not say anything for a long moment. He had not known any of this. He had not known about the birthday tears or the bad dream or the note in the lunchbox. He had been at the house on all of those days. He had eaten breakfast with his daughter on the morning of that first day of school. He had given her a hug at the door before the driver took her in. He had watched her walk down the driveway with her small backpack, and he had felt proud of her, the way a father feels proud when his daughter is brave. But he had not known about the note. Maya watched her father's face. She had learned, in the careful way only children of busy adults learn, how to read silence on the faces of the people she loved. She knew when her father was thinking about work. She knew when he was thinking about her mother. And she knew now, looking at him sitting on the edge of her bed, that he was thinking about something he had not thought about before. "Do you want to see the note?" she asked softly. Thomas looked up. "Yes," he said. "I would like that very much." Maya stood up and walked to the small white dresser by the window. She opened the top drawer carefully, the way she opened things that held something important inside, and she reached into the back corner under a small stack of folded handkerchiefs. She pulled out a piece of paper that had been folded into a tiny square, the kind of square that only fits inside a child's hand. She brought it back to the bed and handed it to him. Thomas unfolded the paper slowly. The creases were soft from being opened and refolded many times. The handwriting was simple and round, the way someone writes when they have not gone to school for very many years but want their words to be readable. It said only 3 words: "You are brave." Underneath, in smaller letters, was a small heart drawn with a single careful line. Thomas looked at the note for a long time. He felt his throat tighten in a way he was not used to. He had read contracts that were 100 pages long. He had read letters from senators and from foreign ministers and from men who had built fortunes larger than his own. None of them had ever made him feel the way this small folded paper made him feel. "She wrote this when you were 6, he said. "Yes," Maya said. "On the first day of first grade." Thomas refolded the note carefully along the same lines Maya had folded it, and he handed it back to her. She tucked it into the small pocket on the front of her dress. "I keep it with me sometimes," she said. "When I'm nervous at school, it helps." Thomas nodded slowly. He did not trust his voice for a moment. "Maya," he said finally, "I need to think about some things. I want you to come downstairs for dinner soon. Can you do that?" "Yes, Daddy." He stood up. He almost walked out of the room without saying anything else, the way he often walked out of rooms when his mind had already moved on to the next thing it needed to do. But he stopped at the door and turned back. "Maya," he said, "thank you for showing me the note." Maya nodded. She did not say anything else. She picked her book back up off the rug and opened it to where the ribbon was, and Thomas closed the door gently behind him as he stepped back into the hallway. He stood there for a moment in the quiet, his hand still on the doorknob. Then he walked toward the back staircase, the one the staff used, because for the first time in 8 years, he wanted to see the kitchen the way the people who worked there saw it. Dinner that night was a quiet affair. Mrs. Patris had prepared roast chicken with potatoes and green beans, the kind of meal that was meant to be comforting rather than impressive. Maya sat in her usual chair, swinging her feet slightly above the floor, picking at her green beans without much interest. Thomas sat across from her at the long, polished table, the place setting at the head of the table empty, the way it had been empty for 8 years. Esther was not in the dining room. She was in the kitchen, helping to clear the prep counters before her shift ended. Thomas knew this because he had passed through the kitchen on his way down the back stairs earlier and had seen her there, wiping down the marble counters with quick, practiced movements. She had looked up when she heard him on the stairs, and for a brief moment their eyes had met. Then she had quickly looked back down at her work, the way she always did, and Thomas had walked past without saying anything because he had not known what to say. "You're not eating much," Thomas said to Maya. "I'm not very hungry," Maya replied. "Did something happen at school today?" She shook her head. "Is it because of this afternoon?" Maya thought about that. "A little," she said. Thomas set down his fork. "Maya, I haven't made my decision yet. I want you to understand that." Maya looked up at him. Her eyes were not angry. They were just steady. "Are you scared?" he asked her. "A little," she said again. "Of what?" Maya's voice was very quiet. "That she'll have to go away." Thomas felt the weight of those words settle into his chest. He looked at his daughter across the long table, at her small hands folded carefully in her lap, at the way she was trying to be brave while saying something that scared her. "Maya," he said gently, "why do you think she would have to go away?" "Because sometimes when grown-ups make decisions, the people who don't get picked have to leave," Maya said. "Like at school when teams get chosen and the last kids feel bad." Thomas almost smiled. Almost. "That's not exactly how it works in a house," he said. "But it could," Maya said. "If you say no to her, maybe she'll feel bad and not want to stay, or maybe she'll get a new job somewhere else, or maybe you'll think she did something wrong by being my friend and you'll send her away because of it." He looked at her for a long moment. He had not realized she had been carrying that fear. "Maya," he said, "Miss Esther isn't going anywhere because of what happened today. I promise you that. Whatever I decide about the nanny situation, that part is not in question." Maya nodded slowly, but the relief on her small face was the kind of relief that comes only halfway, the way relief comes when a child has heard part of what she needed to hear but not all of it. "Can I go upstairs?" she asked. "You barely ate." "I know." Thomas hesitated, then he nodded. "Go on." Maya climbed down from her chair carefully and walked across the dining room. At the doorway, she paused and looked back. "Daddy," she said. "Yes, Maya. You can ask her, you know." "Ask her what?" "If she wants to take care of me, you can just ask her. She'll tell you the truth. She always tells the truth." Then she turned and walked out of the dining room and up the back staircase, the soft sound of her footsteps disappearing into the upper floor. Thomas sat alone at the long table for a few minutes after she left. The chicken on his plate had gone cold. He thought about getting up and reheating it or asking Mrs. Patris to do it, but he didn't move. He just sat there looking at the empty chair where his wife used to sit, and the empty chair where his daughter had just been sitting, and the empty seat at the head of the table where in some houses the head of the household would sit. But where in this house no one ever sat because Thomas always preferred the seat with a view of the window. After a while, he stood up. He folded his napkin neatly and laid it on the table. He picked up his plate and his daughter's plate, and he carried them both into the kitchen himself, which was something he had not done in many years. Esther was at the sink, washing a large mixing bowl with her back to the door. She did not hear him come in at first. He set the plates down softly on the counter, and the small sound made her turn around. "Oh," she said, startled. "Mr. Whitmore, I'm sorry, sir, I didn't hear you." "I'll take those right away." She moved to dry her hands on her apron, but Thomas raised one hand slightly. "It's all right, Miss Brooks, I brought them down myself." She paused, uncertain. He could see in her face that she was trying to understand what was happening, the way staff who have worked in big houses for a long time always try to understand what is happening when something breaks the normal rhythm of the day. "Could you sit down for a moment?" Thomas asked. "I'd like to talk with you." Esther stayed where she was. "Sir, I'm just finishing up. If I sit down now, I'll fall behind on the dishes." "The dishes can wait." She still did not move. Thomas understood slowly what was happening. She was not refusing him. She was protecting herself. In the long, quiet years of her work, she had learned that conversations with the head of the household rarely happened in kitchens, and when they did, they rarely meant good news. He pulled out a chair at the small staff table near the window, the one where the kitchen workers ate their lunches on the days they did not eat in the back room, and he sat down himself. "Please," he said, "just for a few minutes." Esther dried her hands carefully on her apron. She walked slowly to the chair across from him and sat down on the very edge of it, her back straight, her hands folded in her lap, the way women like Esther always sat in chairs they had not been invited to sit in before. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The kitchen was quiet. The big copper pots hung above the stove, dimly catching the light from the small lamp Mrs. Patris kept on near the doorway. The refrigerator hummed softly. Somewhere in the wall above their heads, the old plumbing made a small click and then settled again. Thomas placed his hands flat on the table, fingers spread, the way he sometimes did when he wanted to keep them still. "Miss Brooks," he said, "how long have you been working in this house?" 8 years next spring, sir. And before that, I worked for the Caldwell family for 11 years in Westchester, and before that I cleaned offices at night in the city while my daughter was in school. Thomas nodded slowly. "I didn't know you had a daughter." Esther was quiet for a moment. "I had a daughter, sir," she said softly. "Her name was Nanny. She passed away when she was 9 years old, pneumonia. It was a long time ago now." Thomas looked down at the table for a moment. He had not expected that. He did not know how to respond to it in the way the situation deserved. He had buried his wife 8 years ago, and he still did not always know what to say when someone told him about a loss of their own. "I'm sorry, Miss Brooks, I didn't know. There was no reason for you to know, sir. Was she your only child?" "Yes, sir." The room got very quiet again. Esther kept her eyes on her hands. "Maya was the same age Amani had been," Esther said after a moment, "when I started working here. 7 going on 8. I didn't notice the resemblance at first. I just noticed she was a little girl who was always running around looking for something. And then one day I realized she was looking for someone." Thomas felt the tightness return to his chest. "She wasn't looking for me," Esther said quickly, almost defensively, as if she did not want him to misunderstand. "I knew that. I would never have presumed. She was just looking for someone who would stop and listen to her. So when she came into a room I was cleaning, I would stop, that's all. I wasn't trying to take anyone's place. I was just trying to be the person who didn't walk past." Thomas did not say anything. He could not. "I'm sorry, sir," Esther said quietly. "I shouldn't have said all that." "No," Thomas said. "Please keep speaking." Esther looked up at him for the first time. Her eyes were dark and tired and very steady. "Sir," she said, "I know how it looked this afternoon. I know what those women thought. They thought I had been working all these years to get close to your daughter so I could one day become more than what I was hired to be. They thought I was looking for a way up, the way some people in service do. But that isn't true, Mr. Whitmore. I never expected anything to come of any of it. I never wanted anything to come of any of it. I just wanted her not to feel alone the way my Amani had to feel alone at the end." Thomas closed his eyes for a moment. "What do you mean?" he asked quietly. Esther's voice was steady but very low. "I was at work, sir, the night Amani died. I was cleaning an office building uptown. Her grandmother was with her, but her grandmother was old and tired, and she fell asleep in the next room. Amani called for me twice during the night, and there was nobody to hear her. I came home in the morning, and she was gone. The kitchen was completely still. I made a promise to myself that night," Esther continued, "that whatever house I worked in, if there was ever a child there who called out in the night, I would hear. That was all. That was the only thing I was trying to do." Thomas opened his eyes slowly. He looked at the woman sitting across from him, at the careful posture, at the folded hands, at the dark uniform she had been wearing for almost 8 years in his house without him ever really seeing her, and he understood something that he should have understood many years ago. His daughter had not chosen Esther because Esther was convenient. His daughter had chosen Esther because Esther had been listening for her every single night, for years, the way no one else in the house had been listening. He swallowed. "Miss Brooks," he said, "may I ask you one question, and may I ask you to answer it honestly?" "Yes, sir." "If I asked you to take care of my daughter officially as her nanny with all the responsibility that goes with it, would you accept?" Esther was quiet for a very long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was careful, almost cautious, the way a person speaks when they have learned over many years not to trust the kind of question that sounds too good to be real. "Sir," she said, "I am very grateful that you would even consider asking me that. I want you to know I do not take it lightly." "That is not an answer, Miss Brooks." She lowered her eyes for a moment. "I know, sir." Thomas waited. "If I say yes," Esther said slowly, "there will be talk. Other staff in this house will whisper. People in the town will whisper. The agency you brought those women from will whisper. Some of those whispers will reach your daughter at her school. Some will reach you at your office. Some may even reach Maya as she grows up, and she will hear them and have to defend a choice she made when she was 7 years old." "I am aware of that," Thomas said. "And some people will say I took advantage of a child," Esther said, "that I crossed lines I should not have crossed, that a woman like me does not move from one position to another in a house like this without something being wrong in the picture." "I am aware of that, too." Esther looked up at him. "I have lived a long time, Mr. Whitmore. I know what the world says about women who look like me when they end up somewhere they were not expected to be. I would not want my being here to bring shame on Maya, on you, or on the memory of your late wife. That matters to me more than what the position would mean for me personally." Thomas was quiet for a long moment. "Miss Brooks," he said finally, "I have spent most of my life making decisions based on what other people would think. I built a company doing exactly that. I have lived in this house doing exactly that. And while I was busy worrying about what the world might say, my daughter was the only one in this house who was actually paying attention to what was happening here. A 7-year-old child saw what I should have seen years ago." Esther's hands trembled slightly in her lap, but she kept them still. "I am not asking you this question because Maya pushed me to ask it," Thomas continued. "I am asking it because, after listening to her this afternoon and after listening to you tonight, I have realized that the most important position in my daughter's life has been filled, unofficially, by a woman I had been writing checks to as a cleaning lady. And I am not willing to let that continue without acknowledging it for what it is." Esther's eyes filled, but she did not cry. "So I will ask you one more time," Thomas said gently. "If I offer you this position with a new contract, a new salary, and full authority over Maya's daily care, will you accept it?" Esther swallowed hard. She looked at him, and then she looked down at her hands again, and then she looked back up. "Yes, sir," she said quietly. "I will accept it." Thomas exhaled slowly, the way a man exhales when he has been holding his breath for longer than he realized. "Thank you," he said. "I should be the one thanking you, sir." "No," Thomas said. "You shouldn't." They sat there for a moment longer in the quiet kitchen, neither of them quite knowing what to do next, the way two people sit together when something has just shifted between them and the old rules no longer apply, but the new rules have not yet been written. Then Thomas stood up. "I'd like to tell Maya tonight," he said, "before she goes to sleep." "Yes, sir." "Would you come up with me?" Esther hesitated. "Sir, it might be better if you tell her alone. She should hear it from you." Thomas thought about that for a moment, then nodded. "All right, but I'd like you to come up after when I call for you, so she can see that this is real, so she can see that the two of us are in this together now." "Yes, sir." Thomas walked toward the door. He stopped at the threshold and turned back. "Miss Brooks," he said. "Yes, sir. My wife would have liked you very much. I should have told you that years ago." Esther's eyes filled again, but she nodded once. "Thank you, sir," she said softly. "That means a great deal to me." Thomas left the kitchen and walked slowly up the back staircase, one hand on the wooden banister, the same banister Esther had polished every Friday morning for 8 years without anyone ever stopping to thank her for it. When he reached Maya's door, he stopped and listened for a moment. He could hear her humming softly to herself the way she always hummed when she was getting ready for bed. He knocked gently and stepped inside. Maya was already in her bed, her stuffed rabbit tucked under one arm, her bedside lamp casting a small circle of warm yellow light across the blue blanket. She looked up when her father came in, and she did not say anything. She just watched him cross the room and sit down on the edge of her bed the way he had earlier that afternoon. "Maya," Thomas said gently, "I have something to tell you." Maya's eyes widened slightly. He could see her trying very hard not to ask the question first. "I spoke with Miss Esther tonight," Thomas said. "In the kitchen, we had a long talk. I asked her if she would like to be your nanny officially, not just someone who helps around the house, but the person who takes care of you." Maya did not breathe for a moment, and she said yes. For a long second, Maya did not move. She just stared at him the way children stare at adults when they are afraid they have misheard. Then her face changed all at once. Her eyes filled with tears that did not fall. Her mouth trembled, and then slowly a smile broke across her face, the kind of smile Thomas had not seen on his daughter in a very long time, maybe ever. "Really?" she whispered. "Really?" Maya sat up in her bed and threw her small arms around her father's neck and held on tight. Thomas closed his eyes. He could feel her shaking a little, not from sadness, but from relief, the way children shake when something they have been afraid of for a long time is finally taken off their shoulders. "Thank you, Daddy," Maya whispered against his collar. "Thank you, thank you, thank you. You're welcome, sweetheart." When she finally let go, she looked up at him with wide, bright eyes. "Where is she?" "She's still in the kitchen. I told her I'd call her up when you were ready." "I'm ready now." Thomas stood, walked to the door, and called softly down the hallway for Esther. A moment later, he heard her careful footsteps on the back stairs, and then she appeared in the doorway of Maya's room, her hands folded in front of her apron, her face uncertain. Maya did not wait. She climbed out of bed in her nightgown and ran across the room and wrapped both arms around Esther's waist and held on the way she had held on that afternoon in the great room. Esther bent down slowly and put one hand on the back of Maya's head, the way mothers do. and for a long, quiet moment none of them spoke. Thomas stood in the corner of the room and watched the two of them, the small girl with her tear-streaked face and the older woman who had been waiting in doorways for 8 years for someone to finally invite her in. And he understood, perhaps for the first time in his life, that family is not always something you are born into. Sometimes it is something a child has the courage to point at and name, even when the grown-ups in the room are too afraid to see it. The months that followed brought small changes to the Whitmore house. Esther was given a new uniform, a simple but well-tailored one, and a new title that the rest of the staff learned to use. She moved her belongings from the small staff quarters off the kitchen into a comfortable room on the second floor, just down the hall from Maya. She began to sit at the dining room table with Thomas and Maya for meals, awkwardly at first, then more naturally as the weeks went by. There were whispers just as Esther had predicted. Some of them reached the house. Most of them did not last. By the time spring came, Maya was sleeping through the night again. Her grades at school went up. She started laughing more. She started drawing pictures of 3 figures holding hands: a tall man, a small girl, and a woman in a soft gray dress, standing together in front of a house with the lights on in the windows. One evening in May, Thomas came home from work and found Maya and Esther in the garden, planting yellow flowers along the back fence. He stood at the kitchen window for a long time, watching them, and he thought about the afternoon many months earlier when his daughter had crossed a marble floor and chosen a woman in a doorway over 6 women in tailored coats. He understood now that the most important decisions in life are not always made by the people who think they are in charge. Sometimes they are made by the smallest person in the room, the one who has been quietly watching, the one who already knows who has been showing up, the one who has the courage to point at love and call it by its real name. This story teaches us that the people who stay when no one is watching, the ones who listen for our voices in the dark, the ones who care without asking for anything in return, are the ones who become our real family. A child does not measure love by titles or salaries or professional training. A child measures love by who is there. And sometimes, if we are very fortunate, a child is brave enough to teach the grown-ups around her what they had forgotten how to see. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who believes that real family is built by the people who stay, not the people who look right on paper. Thank you for watching, and until next time, may you always have someone in your life who hears you when you call out in the dark.